Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. This week, we're bringing you a special programme focusing on a story that's been dominating the headlines since the start of 2020. That's, of course, the latest escalation between Tehran and Washington. This after a top Iranian commander, that's Qassem Soleimani, was killed in a US drone strike. Iran has since warned that it will retaliate with its officials, alluding to 13 revenge scenarios. Donald Trump, for his part, has threatened to hit 52 Iranian targets, including cultural sites, an act deemed illegal under international law. Now, throughout the show, I'll be joined by Mohammad Ali Shabani. He's a doctoral researcher at SOAS University of London, where he focuses on relations between Iran and Iraq. Mohammad Ali, thank you so much for being with us here on Middle East Matters. Now, we're actually going to start the programme with images from the funeral of the fallen general in his hometown of Kerman, where stampede has led to dozens of deaths. Now, Soleimani was the head of the elite Quds force, which falls under the umbrella of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. France 24's Delano de Souza takes a close look at this group, which implements the country's foreign policy goals, but it is accused by the US of supporting terrorist organizations.
Established in the wake of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the Revolutionary Guards are often described as a parallel government within Iran. The IRGC controls much of the country's economy and wields more power and influence than the army itself. Tasked with protecting national interests at home and abroad, it's heavily involved in regional politics and conflicts. Its foreign arm, the elite Quds force, has been instrumental in military and political successes outside Iran, making the man who headed the organization, the late Qassem Soleimani, a highly regarded figure in the country. Under him, the Quds force successfully developed local militias to back Iranian interests in the region.
He's responsible essentially for putting together the resistance to the insurgencies in Syria, keeping Assad in power. He's also been behind the Hezbollah and also obviously in creating all these organizations in Iraq. I mean, in many ways, he's been, considering the leadership of Iran, he's the guy who has been the most charismatic, the most visible in terms of successes.
Last year, the United States designated Iran's Revolutionary Guards a terrorist organization, an unprecedented step as it's the first time a government's official military wound up on the list. Washington says it ordered Qassem Soleimani's killing as he was plotting imminent attacks on Americans in the Middle East. Claims Tehran vehemently denies. Soleimani's replacement, meanwhile, has vowed his death won't be in vain.
We promise to continue down Martyr Soleimani's path as firmly as before, with the help of God, and in return for his martyrdom, we aim to get rid of America from the region in several steps.
Iran says Qassem Soleimani was targeted numerous times in the past. The man who contributed to Tehran's growing influence in the region died on foreign soil, where most of his battles were fought.
Let's now bring in our guest, Mohammad Ali Shabani. We heard in that report that Soleimani was a powerful, iconic figure, of course, based on the images pouring out from his funeral, certainly a revered figure across Iran. But of course, he wasn't exactly irreplaceable. His assassination won't stop Iran's plans in any way, will it?
Well, I fully agree with the statement that he's not irreplaceable, given that he's the head of an institution, an organization which has produced leaders like him in the past, and already, his successor was appointed within 12 hours, which indicates that there's a process in place. And for someone like him, a very charismatic leader who often was seen in the battlefront, succession must have been in his mind almost forever. I mean, almost always. So I think if you see just statements by, for instance, Ayatollah Khamenei referring to him as a living martyr, even when he was alive, that indicates the kind of position he had and what kind of forward planning his organization had.
Now, looking beyond the rhetoric that we're hearing, this war of words, what steps can we actually expect Iran to take, what they're calling retaliation?
So I think there are two different ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it is to see a tit for tat. The US side attacked an Iranian commander, so they want to respond proportionately. Another way to look at it is in the way President Rouhani and this IRGC commander have formulated things, and that is to say that, quote unquote, real revenge entails ending the US military presence in the region. I think most immediately this refers to Iraq and Syria, which has long been a strategic Iranian interest. So in some ways, Soleimani, especially in Iraq right now, seems to have achieved in death what he could not achieve in life.
We will come back to the regional issue, but I want to address, of course, there are a plethora of questions here. There's also this increasing doubt on the legality of this US strike that killed Soleimani. Can you tell us more about that?
So the US administration has argued that there was signs, or there were intelligence, credible intelligence, of a so-called impending attack. Other US sources have, for instance, told the New York Times that the evidence for that was quote-unquote razor thin. Subsequently, there have been reports, or actually the Iraqi Prime Minister himself in addressing Parliament the other day stated that Soleimani was in Baghdad, in fact, to hand over an Iranian response to a Saudi peace initiative. That also clashes with the idea that he had arrived in Iraq when he was attacked by a US drone, supposedly to organize an attack. So I think the legality of it has been condemned, including by the UN Special Rapporteur, I think, on extrajudicial killings. So I think in grander scheme of things, it's quite thin, the argument for the legality of it.
Okay, well, Mohammad Ali Shabani, do stay with us for now. We're going to take a look at the impact that Soleimani's assassination will have on regional dynamics, something that we mentioned earlier on. The US is sending now thousands of additional troops to the Middle East, this despite lawmakers in Iraq having voted to remove those very foreign forces. We also have to remember that this is a country which has been home to Iran's militia proxies, who have, on the one hand, fought the Islamic State group, but on the other, been accused of alienating Sunni Arab communities.
Has Iraq become the front line of a proxy war between the United States and Iran? That's the question that Iraqis, both young and old, are asking themselves.
We are peaceful. Fight your wars and resolve your problems, but do it far from Iraq.
Why must Iraq always be the battlefield for conflicts between regional powers?
Many political analysts say America's decision to eliminate Soleimani was taken unilaterally, without proper consideration for the regional fallout.
The American strike came from a direct order by President Trump alone, but its consequences for the future were not thought out. He should have consulted with Iraqi authorities before launching this kind of attack to see if there are scores to settle or political calculus to prevent Iraq from becoming a buffer state.
A buffer state between the U.S. and especially Iran, whose growing domination of Iraq's internal politics and security has been at the heart of mass street demonstrations that have shaken the country in recent months, as protesters demand an end to a corrupt political system they say is manipulated by Iran. After the fall of Saddam Hussein's totalitarian regime in 2003, brought on by a U.S. invasion, Tehran has extended its political and economic influence over its neighbor. And while there has been some celebration over the death of Soleimani, vilified for months by the protest movement, demonstrators have also denounced the violation of their country's sovereignty by the U.S.
That was a report by France 24's Brian Quinn. Let's now go back to London, where Mohammad Ali Shabani is standing by for more on that story. Can you tell us, Mohammad Ali, what would happen if foreign troops are indeed expelled from Iraq? What's the scenario that we're looking at?
Well, the expulsion of foreign troops from Iraq, I think, is going through the legal process, so the political process via parliament. And once that occurs, I think there's actually a chance of a real de-escalation, chiefly because of the removal of US targets, not just for Iran, but also for the Iraqi militias. Bear in mind that in the US attack, the only person killed was not Qassem Soleimani. He was also a senior operational commander of the Iraqi armed forces. the deputy commander of the so-called Popular Mobilization Forces. So I think the removal of US forces prevents not just Iranian retaliation, but also Iraqi retaliation. So in a way, I think it's a good move to prevent tension, or further tension, if I put it better.
So you're speaking of possible de-escalation if indeed troops are expelled, but do we not have reason then to fear a potential Islamic State group resurgence?
That is a valid concern, but I think right now the Iraqi forces, together with their regional allies, are capable of keeping ISIS in the bottle within Iraq's borders, especially with their Kurdish partners. So I don't foresee that as an immediate threat.
And Iran will continue to fight the group if it need be?
Oh, they've never stopped, I think. They've been in coordination with the Iraqi government throughout, and in Syria they have separate arrangements there with other powers such as Russia. So I think the idea that the fight against ISIS will halt if US troops leave Iraq, it's a bit far-fetched.
Last but not least, if we can keep it brief, are there any players, Mohammad Ali, that are likely to benefit from this fallout? Some observers have spoken about Russia potentially taking advantage of this vacuum.
Well, in the aftermath of Parliament's measure to expel US troops, there are reports that the Russians have offered the Iraqi government access to S-400 missile defense systems, some of the most advanced in the world, to protect, quote-unquote, its sovereignty against aerial attack. As we've seen, for instance, in Syria, where Russia has also installed similar missile defense systems of advanced nature. Russia has been quite quick and keen on filling the gaps, or rather than just a vacuum, taking advantage of the mistakes of the United States. So again, I think the idea of the US leaving and there be a complete vacuum, the fight against ISIS halting, and no other actors stepping in to uphold the security in Iraq is a bit far-fetched.
On that note, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I'd like to thank our guest, Mohammad Ali Shabani. Also, thank you for watching this special edition of Middle East Matters. Do stay tuned.